Welcome to the Moms Making Dough podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Hewitt, and today is episode 47 and the final episode of 2025. And I am so excited to be here with you. If you have been a loyal listener to Moms Making Dough, thank you for your support. And if this is your first time here, I'm going to start off with giving you a little backstory of where this show came from. And that is this Moms Making Dough podcast is a podcast idea I had probably about 2 to 3 years ago when my daughter was 2 years old. And I was just like in the weeds, right? Trying to learn how to adjust to being a new mom, running multiple businesses, trying to be a wife, and just being like, man, this is something that like I feel like there's such an overlooked conversation on is, as a working mom, whether you are a working mom in someone else's business or in your own, or on your own, it is like such a delicate dance, and it is a super rewarding one, but it can be also a super stressful one at times. So this show was designed that I wanted to have a place where we could have conversations about how you make, manage, and multiply your money, but also all of the mindset shifts behind those three legs of the stool, I like to call them. So those are the 4 pillars of this podcast and the premise behind it. But I have to be completely honest, and that's going to bring me to my 5 lessons today that I have realized by starting a podcast when I really started to think about what were some of the reoccurring themes. And one of the things that really stood out to me was sharing this part of the story with you is that I had been talking about doing a podcast for almost 15 years. The concept, like what I wanted to talk about, has evolved into this point. And I really got some steam when COVID happened and I had more downtime in my home. Or I was stuck in my home looking for a creative outlet that I didn't have. But I was also in the weeds of just having a newborn. And I was completely unrealistic about what would have to happen as a mom. And I realized, like I said, that this was something I had thought about for 15 years, which brings me to my first lesson. And that is going to be this: perfectionism can paralyze you or it can propel you. And why I share the 15 years part is because the key theme I want you to hear that I've noticed throughout my podcast this last year is just about how often I come back to progress over perfection. And the reason that is so important is because my extreme perfectionism has delayed me starting the podcast. And this has been one of the most rewarding things. And one of the things that's funny is when you start to get a little bit, when you're starting to do multiple episodes, something else I found out was that the average person that starts a podcast does 7 episodes and that's it. And here's what started to happen. I would run into I went to my high school reunion and 3 or 4 people that I had no idea, including 2 guys, shared that they had shared it with their spouse and or listened to themselves. And I left that thinking, man, I was like, when you think no one's listening, someone always is. And every time I start to think that, someone will send me a message. Someone will rate or review the podcast, and or even better, they will write a review and I will actually read it and then realize that it is from someone I know but have not seen or heard from or have no connection with, but they've known me from another chapter of my life, and they're still interested in listening to what I have to say, which is mind-blowing for me. But I remember just thinking about if I thought about this first lesson of lesson number 1 being perfection can paralyze you and or it can propel you, is that I was always waiting for my studio's not perfect. I can't tell you how many people have said your lighting sucks, you need to fix it. We have literally done all these lighting, and I'm like, you know what? Then I had a mentor of mine. She's like, dude, I started my podcast, and she has a very, very popular podcast in my freaking closet. She said sometimes I did it from my car. Um, so it's just like getting over the perfect studio, the perfect lighting, the perfect schedule of like, hey, I'm always going to do this on Mondays at 5. But then, my daughter's homesick, so that's not going to work today. Realizing that starting imperfectly was a breakthrough for me. And I don't know who that's going to land and who needs to hear that today. But that was one by far when I sat down to write down this episode outline, I was like, damn, that is lesson number 1, is that I am only here because for some strange reason, I finally got enough over my perfectionism that I could do this. And so I also say, like, perfectionism often, I find I'm learning a lot about perfectionism and how it has impacted me, not just this year, but my whole life. And it's realizing that starting imperfectly was a breakthrough for me. Also showed me that there was a lot of mixed mindset and beliefs behind it. So meaning, like, to me, perfectionism often disguises itself as a standard. Like, hey, this is my standard of what I want to put out there. And when it controls you, which perfectionism is a form of control, it starts to create stagnation. And that stagnation will never allow you to set a standard. And just like let that land. Because, man, when I thought about it that way, I was like, shit. Like, man, what I am finding often, not only with my coaching and my consulting, but also with my podcasting, that I am just working through my own stuff and hoping it lands and helps someone else the way as it becomes as I become aware of it myself. So it helped me start to see that my perfectionism wasn't protecting me. It was actually controlling me and keeping me from the vision I really want of the person I want to be. Someone who is confident, someone who is calm, someone who is very at peace with who they are and not caring about what other people think. If any of this landed, this first lesson on, like, asking yourself, the coach in me always has to give you a question, right? Is, what am I postponing because I want it to be perfect? And in my case, it was the podcast, like I said, for 15 years. And it's also made me start to reflect on how many things I have postponed because of my perfectionism, and about how this does not happen overnight where I'm just going to be like, oh, my perfectionism is gone. It is always going to be something that is there because it is something I have to work through. And asking yourself, what am I postponing because I want it to be perfect? And just moving towards, start to just even air that out, as I like to say, like, get that out of your body and into the universe of what that is, so that you can start moving towards it. And that brings me to lesson number 2, which is going to piggyback off of this one. And that is going to be, small hinges swing big doors. One of my favorite, you can call it cliche sayings, but it's one I go back to consistently, with the theme being how important is that consistency trumps intensity, which was a theme in many, many of my episodes and many of my messages. Primarily because I am a person that when I get hyper-focused, especially with my ADHD, I tend to be intense. How I talk, how I move. When I work out, the more intense it is, the better it feels for me. And when I say small hinges swing big doors, what I mean is showing up weekly, even when my energy is low, even when I didn't sleep good the night before, even when my daughter's sick, even when, I'm short on time. Not just going through the motions, but really being intentional about showing up. And that is something that I constantly repeat in my head, is that showing up and putting in an effort that isn't just checking a box, which is, again, another lesson I'm really working on, but it's not It's just part of this small hinges swing big doors for the 5 lessons of 2025, because I realized how often this theme came up in a lot of my episodes. And really starting to think about like, what are small scheduling tweaks that would make a big difference? This is like digesting this is like small steps to bigger goals. What I like to say, God-given goals. And smaller financial shifts. Maybe it's, hey, I canceled these 3 subscriptions that I barely use and I replace them with something different. Or maybe it's a small financial shift where like you have a really bougie gym like I did and you no longer feel like you need that. And you go down back to your old school gym where you get an even better workout because you go in, you go out, you know all the equipment, you know where it's at, it's way less busy, and it's the price tag is much more appeasing so that you can put that money someplace else that's more in alignment with where you want to go. Or maybe it's small business adjustments. Maybe it's like, hey, I need to hire an assistant. And that means that these are the things that that person needs to do. Small shifts like, hey, I don't check my email anymore, or things like that. That might not sound small, but it is something that to a business owner where you're juggling so many hats, that might be a small adjustment. So small steps lead to big changes over time. Small hinges swing big doors. So question here, or a statement first, and then I'll say the question for here, because the coach in me always has to give you a question when you're listening here, and you can choose to do it or not. Nothing about this podcast changed my life overnight, but everything about it right now is changing my trajectory, how I spend my time, how I spend my money, what I'm talking about, who I'm spending time with, how I actually spend my time in terms of planning for what I'm going to talk about and who I'm going to interview is becoming totally a different animal. And it's something I look forward to. So I want you to think about the one question I would ask here with my coach hat on is choose one small habit to carry into 2026. What's something that you could protect fiercely, like the lioness you are, that would allow you to feel like you are protecting or providing for your pride? And it can be, like I said, something super small. Cancel those subscriptions I don't use. Shift to, like how that I'm, get a new, it might be something big. Hey, start looking into like if I changed career paths, maybe it's going back to school for some people. Whatever that small thing is, maybe it's drinking a glass of water before you drink a cup of coffee. That's one of mine this year is like water first, then coffee. Actually, I should even say I'm getting even more specific this year. I'm going to do water, protein, and then coffee. So lesson number 3, what you measure, you master. It actually matters what those metrics are. And why I wanted to share this one, this is one I see in coaching constantly. I have people come from me that have a business coach, a marketing coach, a PR coach, like you name it, a personal trainer, all of these things, all of these different categories of our life that we're managing as busy moms, working moms, and parenting coach, whatever it is. And a lot of times these coaches have frameworks that are cookie cutters. They are not, they're putting you into like measuring metrics. And I'm going to use business as an example because that's the obviously easier one for me to talk about. But a lot of business owners come to me with specific KPIs like that they've got from whether it's their industry specific and or coach specific. All of these metrics that, while important, might not be the ones that move the needle for you. This is where I call it a cookie cutter approach because they're just giving these metrics to everybody, especially when you come from a corporate type world and you're in business in a corporate setting is like they love to measure this kind of stuff. And they're your more traditional KPIs, key performance indicators. And they're also, in my opinion, borrowed definitions of measuring success. So remember, one of the big themes here that I've talked about a lot is that you can redefine what success means to you at any time. I'm in that phase right now where I'm in a different chapter. Success is totally different than just financial success. It is so much more for me right now with a focus on how I'm spending my time and who I'm spending my time with. And being present, just be present. This is my holiday shirt. And I really, really want to stress here about how much this is where alignment and where you're going really matters over cookie cutter approaches. Because if you are using cookie cutter metrics designed by someone else, they might not actually matter to you. And what you will not pay attention, you will avoid things that don't really align with where you want to go. All progress will stall when metrics are not aligned with your personal values and or the vision of where you want to head. Measurement only works when it's meaningful, and there is no universal scoreboard for success. That's why, like I said, coming back to you get to redefine it. And you just will not move forward if you are measuring things that you actually don't care about. So the practical takeaway from this, what you measure, you master, if it actually matters to you, is what are the metrics that matter to you? Because ultimately, you have to have something for you to measure, for you to be able to start to track where you were, a year ago from here, today, where you are today, and where you will be a year from now. And then finally, or actually not finally, we got 2 more to go. Lesson number 4, you will avoid, like I said, whatever is not in alignment with you. So you cannot make a change or create momentum unless you are aware of a pattern or the story you're telling yourself about it. So misaligned metrics, this builds off of lesson number 3, are going to lead to avoidance, no matter how motivated, driven, determined, disciplined you are. It's not laziness. It's just avoidance because you cannot correlate, you meaning whatever metrics matter to you, how that is going to move you towards your vision. So this is where I talk about the concept, and I did several episodes on this one too. I don't know what numbers they are, but I can link them in show notes, is that Financial Friday. I talked about my Financial Friday date, where I take 1 to 2 hours. It's typically 2 because I do both my personal and my business financial balancing on this check-in with myself. And I book a babysitter if my daughter's not in school. I do this weekly check-in even when it's not perfect. Again, exercising that muscle of progress over perfectionism. And I really look at this as an opportunity. Do I miss weekly? Yes, but I have very little to do because I spent about 5 hours doing it last week of all my end of year stuff. So just noticing the difference when I skip it is huge. And also you want to offer flexibility with yourself. Now, in a perfect world, you set yearly targets. Like I said, I talked about this in episode 46. And you work those yearly targets backwards by reverse engineering them in a quarterly, a monthly, and then a weekly format. Again, I encourage you, if you're going to do it, if weekly is a stretch for you, even doing it monthly and starting to create the habit will be a huge, huge thing. Avoidance is feedback, not failure. So not letting yourself get stuck in, hey, I'm measuring metrics that are not in alignment with where I want to go. And the question I would have I would ask not only myself, but my listeners as well as my clients would be this: is if quarterly feels too much, what can you start breaking down into a smaller step? Maybe it's monthly, and helping yourself create more alignment, which will reduce your resistance and increase your consistency, which again, coming back to lesson number 2, small hinges swing big doors. Consistency will always trump intensity. And then our final lesson for 2025 is going to be lesson number 5, choosing presence over perfection and overproduction. Key theme, again, redefining success, redefining prosperity, redefining financial freedom for yourself. And that's going to look different for every mom in whatever phase they are in. And I want you to really, really start to think about, for me, my personal reflection here is when I thought about this one is just thinking about how my daughter just turned 5. And the last 5 years, obviously she was just born during COVID, were where I was very isolated, and I felt very alone at times. And it only conditioned what I all right, lesson number 5, choosing presence over perfection. So this is again, looking at our culture is designed where us as working moms, we are like, and I'm speaking totally from my own lens right now. It was like, we are so valuing ourselves for what we get done, adding our worth for how productive we are. And not just from a monetary perspective, in every way. And the Superwoman complex was me really just thinking like, hey man, I want to be Superwoman. I know I can do all of it. And part of it was my extreme challenge in asking for help. And then I think, being so isolated in COVID where like I felt like I was really alone, at times, that it allowed that pattern to just even proliferate more. And so it's motherhood intensifies the pressure to do it all. It just adds you another thing, like a mental load. It adds emotional load. It adds daily tasks. It adds caretaking strategies. And it allows that story of our worth being tied to output to, like I said, just even gain some momentum. And I started to really realize this year over doing the podcast how much that theme, that Superwoman complex, had taken over so much of my life without me having awareness around it. And that I absolutely had to start choosing presence and not going through the list in my head of everything that needs to be done, instead of listening to what my husband's saying or listening to what my daughter's asking me to do, or whether it's just play with her, and not having my time with her always be about like doing and task oriented, and much more a focus on being. Like that's what presence means to me, is like the shift from doing, and finding my worth in what I get done and how much I've got done, instead and of shifting to, who am I being? Am I being the mom I want to be? Am I being the wife I want to be? Am I being the boss I want to be? Am I being the business owner I want to be? Am I being the person that when I lay my head on that pillow at night, I'm like, man, I live from my soul today. And I thought about this before I hit record today, is that, there's so many people, it's the last couple of days before the holidays that I'm recording this, that are literally running around like nuts, getting like last minute gifts and all this kind of stuff, and gifts that like a lot of times people don't want, or they definitely don't need in this digital age, right? Like you can get anything you need at the, click of a finger on your iPhone at this point. And that really starting to make a shift from that presence, the physical presence, is not what any of us really, really crave at this time of year. It is much more presence, where we are being and connecting with each other on a different level, on a soul level. And that means also connecting with yourself. Like, what is the desires of your heart? And the soul in the room matters so much more than what's under those trees, that's under that tree wrapped in paper, right? And it got me thinking about how a new framework, and like I said, if you're a loyal listener, I love frameworks, can't end an episode without one. And it just made me really start to think about how when I'm working with clients, we set monthly focuses. And by doing this podcast, that I'm really starting to shift so much more away from just that singular focus. And so I'm going to, if you listen, I also love alliteration. And I'm going to start having all of my clients, myself included, which I already do this, but I'm going to do it on a little bit more simplified level. I've decided this year is to set monthly focuses in 4 categories, in 4 P's. Number 1 is posterity. These are going to be your family, and posterity is number 1. Number 2 is going to be peace. And this is where you are aiming for nervous system regulation, mental calm, and margin in your life. This is like internal peace of like, hey, man, this is something that is making me really, really anxious and I need to get a handle on it. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to do 10 minutes of breath work every day and commit to that for 30 days. Maybe that's your target. Setting it really, really small. But just getting in the habit of like setting one focus you're going to have that month for posterity, one for peace. And like I said, that's your own personal peace, protecting your own personal peace. And that's going to bring me to the 3rd category, which is going to be protection. And this is going to be safeguarding your future. And this could be in any capacity. It could be financially. Hey, I'm going to put a life insurance policy in place this month. It could be emotional. Maybe it is something that you're protecting your energy. Hey, that no longer makes me feel good. It actually drains me in terms of that hobby or that person. I'm not going to spend time with them, whatever it is. And you're going to look at like, what is a protection? Something you could put in that's going to protect your peace, right? So that piece that you already know that you have a baseline that you want to walk towards. And then finally, it's going to be your production one. This is going to be, like I said, probably something financial in most cases. It could be something like that. It could be a financial actual target. It could be, I want to, gross $50,000 this month. So I can break through that ceiling and know I can do it. Whatever it is, but the important thing is that you notice is that the order of these targets, posterity, peace, protection, and production, the production is last. And like I said, I realized that the last couple of years of coaching, I'm always focused on with my clients, specifically, like I said, they're hiring me to help them work better and smarter in their businesses. And that I'm really starting to see the transition about like, I had a mentor that I've talked about this on the podcast multiple times that always said every business challenge is a being challenge, meaning it's on a soul level. That you need to work towards something that you deserve, meaning those are the 5 lessons that I have learned from podcasting this year. So again, number 1 is going to be perfection can paralyze you or it can propel you, progress over perfection. And then the second one is going to be small hinges swing big doors, remembering that consistency will always trump intensity. Number 3, what you measure, you master, as long as it matters to you and is actually alignment with where you want to go. You will avoid whatever it is in alignment, builds off lesson number 3. And number 5 is choosing presence over perfection and productivity. And like I said, not to say that you can't have both, you can, but becoming so much more aware of when you are in what mode you're in. Because I want you to have a life that feels as good as it looks and money that supports both the feelings and the actual facts behind it. And I want you to really just take this opportunity to thank you so much for listening to Moms Making Dough this last year. Acknowledge your own growth. And just like I took the time to acknowledge everything that I learned from having you be one of my loyal listeners. And as always, please share it with someone. And the best gift you could give me this holiday season is to rate and or review Moms Making Dough. I do read every single one of them. And I'm hoping that we set the tone with this episode for 2026, where you're going to have more alignment, more peace, more presence, and ultimately more prosperity because of it. Have an awesome holiday season, and we'll see you next year on Moms Making Dough.